Welcome back to the Jurassic Park podcast. I am your host, Brad Jost, and today we have our full spoiler thoughts on Jurassic World Camp Cretaceous Season 3, and I am back again with my buddy here, Tom Jurassic.
Hello.
How you doing, Tom?
Yeah, I'm good. I am excited, man.
I'm definitely excited. I know we were really just dying to dive into a lot of those bigger details on Season 3 in our non-spoiler chat, but we couldn't. We had to save it for this one, and we're going to get into them today, and I have no idea what's in store for you guys. It's going to be... You have no idea, I guess. It's going to be... No, that's not true. They know. They've seen the show, right? I hope you've seen it. If you haven't,
if you're watching this and you haven't seen it, go watch it.
Yeah.
Come back in 6 months.
Before we dive into our spoiler takes on Season 3, we did a Season 2 roundup. If you wanted to listen to that real quick, that was in episode 274. And as always, a huge thank you to DreamWorks Animation for letting us watch this season early. It makes all the difference to be able to prepare this content ahead of time. So thank you so much. You guys are awesome. Always a pleasure to work with. So thank you so much for that. But if you guys do want some non-spoiler takes, if this is not the content for you, please go back and watch our non-spoiler takes, because we are going to be getting, completely into the spoilers. This is a full spoiler conversation on Season 3. So, like I said, if you have not watched it, please turn this off. Go boot up your Netflix, go log in, find Jurassic World Camp Cretaceous Season 3, watch all 10 episodes, and then come back. Do not stop at 8, do not stop at 9, watch them all, come back, and we'll talk about this. So, without further ado, what do you say we dive into some spoiler topics here? So,
let's do it.
Tom, my watch is going off, but what give me for anybody who didn't hear, I guess, your non-spoiler takes, give me just a general consensus. Like, what did you think about Season 3?
So freaking good. Well, I can go into spoilers. So
you can.
The fact that this directly connects to Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom and it doesn't feel shoehorned. There's actually extra description as to why the Scorpius exists. Perfect. It the way it was handled and the logic behind it perfectly tackled all of my lore concerns from Season 2, and I was really happy with how they explained away the existence of this animal. So my big concern from Season 2 was addressed, and then everything else here was just handled really well. And it felt like a really good season with a lot of consequences in it that I enjoyed seeing unfold.
Yeah. I said it multiple times, but I was floored, and I was just sitting there thinking how bold all of these choices were. We'll get into them all, but like the visitor
Can we
center
appreciate?
Stuff.
I literally called Season 3 in a tweet back when Season 1 came out.
Well, what did you say? What was it?
I said, wouldn't it be cool to see the opening sequence from Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom tied into the show?
Oh, yeah. Oh, totally. I mean, we talked about that a lot, I remember, and I actually talked with Scott Kramer, the executive producer, and he coyly, is that a word? No.
Yeah.
I don't know.
We'll
Whatever.
go with it.
Coyly, he had said, that sounds weird now. He had said, I was asking about the timeline. He's like, it's about 2 to 3 months. And, you have this time frame before the beginning of Fallen Kingdom, which is, about 6 months out, I think he said, or something. So I'm like, at that moment when he said that, I was like, it's on their minds.
Yeah.
It's on their minds. Maybe that means something.
And oh boy, did it mean something.
I want to dive into all those things in a little bit. But just overall, blown away. So bold. The fact that they did that thing, the Main Street Fallen Kingdom thing. The fact that they did the Scorpius Rex in all of its glory, like they did. The visitor center stuff was just incredibly bold. Everything here was just like, wow. Like it just exponentially grew as the season went on. Couldn't believe it. So, I don't want to like, usually I do these conversations where we like sequentially get to like the biggest and best stuff. How do you want to do this? Do you want to dive into some of the best stuff first? Where do you want to go? What's your one topic you want to discuss first?
Wait, say that again.
What's like your one thing you want to discuss first? Do you want to hit some of the bigger things or what? What do you think?
I'm tempted to, but I feel like I want us to warm up a little bit before
Oh,
we
okay.
get
You want to
them.
warm up.
So,
All right.
Should we summarize the story of the third season?
That's fair. Yeah. So I guess, these kids are trying to get off the island, right? They're still trying to get off, and this is something that paid off from what I had said. Actually, one thing that did not. This is like ahead. I have not said a complete sentence in 45 minutes. But one thing that really didn't pay off for me was I was saying in season 2, I was like, the Hap is gonna be back. He is definitely still alive, and the boat's gonna be back. I said those two things were like positive for me. I mean, maybe Hap is still out there. I have no idea because
maybe
it seems like
Tiff is still out there, Brad.
I don't know about that. And I guess we should say that it seems like there's more. There should be more in store, right? Mm-hmm. Leading up to it, it didn't really feel like it felt like this was going to be the end for a little bit, but then the very last second it twisted. So, but again, Hap didn't show up, so I was like, oh man, like that didn't happen. But the boat was there, so these kids are going to use the boat to get off the island. A lot of different craziness ensues in the middle there. Scorpius is unleashed on the island. It has, about 3 months to explore this island and set things into motion chaotically and make the island off balance. And of course, we lead into that Fallen Kingdom sequence towards the end of the season. And it was just incredible to have the timelines meet up where Dr. Wu is coming back to salvage his equipment and his a lot
of our listeners predicted that, which was really cool.
Yeah. And then of course they do all that stuff and eventually do get off the island. But yeah, I think a beautiful season and a beautiful story and so much fun, just so much fun in the middle there.
I think the story of the third season is really interesting because you kind of get this sense that the kids have given up on other people and they've given up on other people coming to rescue them. So they're trying to do things for themselves. And we start with them attempting to escape on a raft. That goes wrong. Naturally, we get something which is very cool in terms of fundamental Jurassic, which is the weather is against them. So already from the start of the season, all of nature is against them on this island, which is something that then factors in further later on as well. So I thought that was really interesting, seeing how that kind of parallels a lot of sort of Crichton's core tones when it comes to our relationship with nature. But also we see them very quickly find Tiff's boat. While they're up at Lookout Point, they spot the boat. It's worth noting that Lookout Point is a new attraction which gets added as part of this story, which was quite cool to see. So
that was my first bit of notes was new locations and Lookout Point was incredible. Like having like essentially gyrosphere gondola system that like brought them up to the top of this lookout that had like like gliders up top and stuff. Like it was just amazing to see this new location. I thought that was a really, really inspired spot. I thought that was awesome.
Yeah, it was really, really cool. And they actually later on in the story, that location gets destroyed as well, so it explains why you never see it again. So it was quite nice to have that kind of self-contained, here's a new location, and then here's why you never see it again.
So I love that bit, by the way. That was pretty hilarious where they light the can or they put it inside the thing and then it goes up and just like poof, and they're like, that's it, and then a few minutes later, just like boom, like this massive. Now, sure, that's maybe a little
emulated
wild, but like
Cybo a little bit. I felt
exactly, dude. I wrote that in my notes that it felt like it was just alluding to, the volcano exploding. And I was like, oh wow, that's really like an evocative image right there, seeing that
like fire raining
explosion
down on them as they were trying to escape.
Oh, yeah, that was pretty awesome. That felt very volcanic, and I thought that was really interesting, like way to put it.
Yeah. So then a lot of the season is them essentially trying to repair Tiff's boat. We don't see her on it. There's no body or anything. Obviously, it's a kid's show. The baryonyx may have eaten all of her. But I did think that was interesting to just note. And then during the process of them attempting to repair the boat, at one point, the boat gets a puncture in the hull, so they have to go and look for resources to fix it. And they end up doing this at what they believe is a private dock at nighttime. So they're at this private dock, and it's caked in mist.
I don't think they're at the private dock yet, right? The private one was the one where the tower was, right? This is still like
you're right, but this is still
like the
like
main
fenced
dock.
Off is what I mean.
Yeah.
So it's
okay.
kind of like
sure.
It's meant to be safe essentially, and
yeah.
But you get the vibe that there's something ominous here because it's dark. There's really good use of the score. It's misty, and you get this really cool sequence here, which kind of to me felt like it was bringing alive the descriptions of the worker village in the Lost World novel at the nighttime, when it's like dark and there's creatures lumbering in the distance, but you can't see them. It felt a lot like that. And the interesting thing to note during this sequence is the animal that ends up attacking the kids while they're attempting to patch up the boat is an Tyrannosaurus. And the Tyrannosaurus was never on InGen's original list. So obviously, in terms of what we were hinting at in our non-spoiler episode, this poses a really interesting question about that list. And I've been thinking about this more and more recently. Because obviously it's not the first instance of something not being on the list appearing on the island. And we see it later in the season with the Monolophosaurus. So I wonder if that list that we've all adhered to is just the list of public assets. So maybe that's things that were readily visible for the public. And there's all these other things that they've been working on the island that perhaps weren't in exhibits yet that are still on Nublar. Brad, you're putting your face in your hand.
Yeah, that's convoluted. It's all so convoluted, man. I hate how obscured and hidden all this information needs to be. Just why is it so, obscured and like we have to hide what is available? Like I understand story-wise, like in the films, it's like, that's kind of a cool detail, but like everybody being shady about all the information it's a turnoff to me, canonically speaking, to say like, well, now I can't trust this information anymore, or this narrator has been unreliable, or this has been unreliable. I don't love having to question what I know as true so often. And that's why I take what I see at face value. So I see what I see in these films. That's what exists, and that's what I see. And I'm not really into taking like the Jurassic World website had so much information, but also a lot of like not as much as you'd want. And it showcased what's there, what's not there, or whatever. And I don't know. I'm tired of like adhering to one specific source or whatever. So I'm just going to watch these things, see what happens, see what unfolds. Tyrannosaurus is there, and it's an incredible moment. I thought that was really, really cool. I loved, like you said, how ominous that moment was with the fog, the dark night. Not Batman, but just a very dark night. And like behind all these shipping containers and stuff, you just see like a tail moving or something walking by in the distance. I thought that was really cool, and a subversion of your expectations, because you're thinking like, oh, this is going to be some big scary beast, and then Tyrannosaurus pops out, and you're like, oh, okay, it's herbivores. We're fine, right? Like, no, you're not fine. These things are insanely brutal, maybe a little too aggressive. But that comes into play a little bit later on. I did think it was funny, the fact that these things had it out for the kids, like 100%, to the point where they jumped in the water, followed the boat, climbed on the boat. I was like, this is absurd, but I love it. I loved every moment of that. That was super cool.
Well, I think it's interesting because when you look at a lot of the films as well, yeah, you have that moment with Zack and Gray with the Ankylosaurus where it hits the gyrosphere, and you have
Hmm.
the moment with Stiggy and Owen in Fallen Kingdom. But the herbivores are never really presented as this genuine threat. They're always like,
Hmm.
"Oh, hey, Stiggy might look stupid. It's gonna charge at Owen." It's never like done in this
Yeah.
kind of sort of serious manner. And here that kind of flips it on its head because you have this dark sequence, like you're saying, where the
Hmm.
ambience is spot on and it genuinely feels quite gothic in terms of how it's presented. And I
Yeah.
feel like stylistically, for a lot of the action sequences in season three, they definitely took a lot of inspiration from Bayona and how he handled Fallen Kingdom, which was really, really cool to see here. Um,
Yeah.
but obviously, as you allude to, these animals are behaving more aggressively than herbivores would be expected to, and we find out that this is ultimately because E750 is loose on the island. So you
Yeah.
get little snippets at the end of each episode that show what it's been doing. There's like a really brutal one where it's like dragging the carcass of a Ceratosaurus along the floor.
Yeah.
Um, so you're kind of
Yeah.
this whole time getting this built up as this really, really omnipresent threat, while all the time the kids don't know what else is going on the island. Um,
Hmm.
so continuing along that story, you basically have this sequence where they escape on the boat and then eventually dock elsewhere to go to Kenji's penthouse. Um, I'll be honest, this is one of the things that really stood out to me as a bit like, why is that there? Because the penthouse is literally a skyscraper, just
Yeah. Yeah.
in a random part of Isla Nubla.
I know. I think, when you see those aerial shots from like Fallen Kingdom, you should be able to see like a skyscraper down there somewhere, right? You would think. But it was silly. It was definitely silly. And I think like, the way that they built that portion of the world, like I love the world building and I think it's
Yeah,
really cool to have this new place. But yeah, it definitely felt like they skimped on some of the details there. Like just there's a private dock, right? So that's
yeah,
cool. You have a private dock, you dock there, you have your segways that take you up to the building. But like I was just laughing because I'm like, this is the place for like millionaires or billion whoever to like go to this penthouse place to ride up there, but it's just a dirt pathway and then like zero plants, zero nothing. It's just like a very dirt and then concrete and nothing special about the entrance of this place. It's just a tower in the middle of the jungle. It was like
yeah.
there's no fanfare to this tower. It's just like you just arrive at a tower. I was like, okay, I would have liked to have seen like it built up a little
Maybe
bit,
like a
feel
little
feel like a
compound
special
around it.
place.
Yeah,
Exactly, a little compound, like a pool, like different, like a different bungalows or different things that make it feel like a lived-in place because it didn't necessarily
yeah,
feel very lived in. It just felt like here I have this asset and I'm just gonna drop it into the jungle. So
yeah.
it was a
I
little
agree with
weird, but
that.
I did like the area with the building with the underground garage system. I thought that
Yeah.
was all pretty cool, but I just wished it was a little more lived in feeling.
Yeah, definitely. I agree with that. I think it kind of just feels like you say, like it's a skyscraper plopped in the middle of a jungle, essentially.
Yeah.
It looks like this isn't meant to be insulting, but it looks like what happens when I try to make a map on like a video game map editor, and it's just like
Well,
loads of trees and then a skyscraper.
I mean, it does have that Jurassic World Evolution vibe where it's like you can't really add a lot of details in Jurassic World Evolution.
Yeah,
You can just place your buildings, and that's kind of what it felt like. So, yeah, that was what. And actually, Jurassic World Evolution, you can at least put a concrete path.
yeah. Frontier, we
But
love you.
besides the point. Besides the point. Yes, we do.
Um, so then I was going to say we get inside, and there's lots of really cool little moments inside. I just looked back at my notes because I had three that I made. The first is the fact that there's a golden Sinoceratops statue that
That was
references
pretty
the
cool.
uncovering of an actual fossil, which was really cool. Um, The second is the fact that there's some kind of Jurassic World book on Kenji's dad's desk, and you never see it properly, but I wonder if that's maybe a nod to either Malcolm or Grant or the survival guide that we've seen in previous seasons. And the third is Kenji gets cut off when he's talking about this compass that the kids have in their possession, but he was going to say, oh, this compass actually belonged to before he got cut off. So I'm wondering if maybe there's a tie to Hammond or somebody else there.
Maybe. Yeah, I don't know. It didn't really pan out to, like, nothing really came of too much consequence, I don't feel like, from the compass, outside of, like, it led them to the visitor center, I guess, which is kind of consequential, I guess. But there wasn't any, like, it wasn't like I was like, oh, I really need the detail on that compass there. But dude, when those Monolophosaurus, actually the first instance when they're riding up to that building, you see the mono there, and you're like, he's just like a statue, and it was hilarious. I love this creature. This is super funny, like a goofy thing. It kind of reminded me of the Ceratosaurus in Jurassic Park 3, where that thing kind of just was like, and then just stopped, looked around for a second, and then got out of there. That's kind of what it reminded me of. So it was very unassuming. And then, of course, you do see a second one. But then there's like 50 of them. It's like there's so many of them that enter this building. And I was like, oh, my God, I did not expect that.
I did make
that was
a
really
note.
Funny.
Why were there so many of them?
I was like, they don't like these kids. They are going to go get them, and this is going to be bad. But that was pretty funny.
But also, again, that goes back to obviously being another animal that wasn't on the original list. So I think that's where, like you say, at this point, it's maybe worth taking things more at face value. Although I do think it is interesting to note that we don't see the Allosaurus throughout any of Camp Cretaceous so far. And we also haven't seen the Suchomimus. And those are the two other animals which were on that original list. So I find it quite interesting, I guess, from a lore perspective, that they've not been brought in before animals that are entirely new, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. They're not too different, I guess, than the ones we've already seen, in a way. I mean, stature, the way that you can use them, fairly similar to what, like, baryonyx or Carnotaur, like this. So I don't know what the use would be, so I kind of understand bringing in a smaller Monolophosaurus or the Uranosaurus and stuff like that. I kind of appreciate that stuff, but the dinosaurs here were really, really fun to watch. I don't want to skip ahead past your points, but you go ahead.
Yeah, I think we had some really, really good moments sort of throughout with the dinosaurs. And I think it's interesting to note, and I'm just looking at my notes of episode 3, we do get a visual prelude to something that we get later on, which is we get a shot of the Monolophosaurus with its face right up against the glass circle window, similar to the kitchen scene in Jurassic Park. And that sets the stage for later in the series, where we then actually go back to the kitchen in Jurassic Park, which is really cool. There's like lots of subtle bits of foreshadowing throughout this, which is really, really cool. So I think that's everything of note that really happens throughout episode 3. I was about to say the whole season. No, there's lots more that happens.
There's a lot more, There's plenty more.
So episode 4, Brad, where do we get to revisit?
I don't know. What is in episode 4? That's not the way my notes are structured. Let me take a look at my episode by episode. Oh, so this one's titled "Clever Girl." Okay, so this one's really cool. What I like about this episode is, the way it kind of starts off with these compies. At some point, like Kenji just being like, here, compies, take these coins. He's just flicking coins, and then eventually one of them gets that compass that we talked about and takes it out to the visitor center. And I was blown away. I loved seeing the visitor center. I thought that was really, really cool. Visually,
my speculation was wrong. It wasn't a new building. It was still the visitor center.
Yeah, see, yeah, initially we all, I think a lot of us thought like, oh, that looks different. It looks like a new place. But after like honestly like an hour or so of looking at it, we're like, okay, maybe this is,
Yeah.
it's got the same windows, it's got the same door, like obviously it's got to be the same place. But it was kind of confusing with the trailer because like you do see the penthouse and you're like, well, maybe these are two of like the same location, just different areas, so you were kind of confused. But yeah, it was cool to see that. And at least again, the interior recreated spectacularly. The outside still represented that Jurassic World aesthetic that we see. It wasn't exactly the Jurassic Park entrance with the stepped waterfall kind of pools and stuff like that, and the walkway up. It was a little different still. So, that is something that bothered me in Jurassic World. I kind of wish they kind of changed it, but what are you going to do? I can't blame them for sticking stylistically to what Jurassic World set up. But knowing that Blue kind of set up a house here, that was really, really fun.
Yeah.
To see that this was her domain, this was somewhere where she could be safe. I really thought that was pretty cool.
I think, yeah, they do a lot throughout this season to kind of set Blue up as a part of Jurassic Park's legacy. And in many ways, the fact that this was her home kind of shows that her creation is fundamentally tied to the past, and she is fundamentally tied to that legacy of John Hammond. And there's some really, really interesting stuff done later in the season, which we'll come on to, which really helps to... It kind of... I don't know if it's just because I've got Falcon and Winter Soldier stuck in my brain at the moment, but I was thinking a lot about the legacy of some of the iconography in Jurassic, and there's lots of interesting stuff done throughout this. So I've got to the point where I'm just pulling up my notes at this point, because I think there's a lot of interesting things in this season.
This at this moment though, I want to stick with the visitor center, because the second that these kids walked up, they all got chills essentially, and they're like, oh, it's the original visitor center. And I don't know if it was you, I think maybe you had said, or somebody had said like how somebody, I forget, I don't remember the entire story, but one of the creators had said something. Oh, you do? Okay, go ahead.
Oh, what is it? No, go on, because I might have been about to say something else and jumped the gun there.
Oh, okay. One of the creators or somebody had talked about how they're going to refer to like the legend of these past people that are involved in the park, and that's where this moment actually does come into play. And like there's like John Hammond has a legend, and this park has a legend and stuff. And the fact, and I know this is probably what you're going to bring up, but like the fact that they refer to the novel in this moment was incredibly beautiful as an alternative take. And the fact that like, so if you don't remember, they mentioned that legend has it that the original park owner broke his ankle here and was eaten by the compies. And it was like, and they're like, well, where'd you hear that? And she's like, I read it somewhere. And you're like, that's hilarious.
It's like literally a direct nod to the novel, and the fact that she's like read the novel. It was incredible.
Beautiful. And she's I'm kind of obsessed with theme park deaths. And I'm like, okay, that's a interesting obsession.
I can relate from all of my theme park addiction.
Yeah, pretty much. I've looked into it myself for sure. Yeah.
I think that moment was really, really, really cool. And like I say, that shows how much attention they've paid to kind of making this really feel like a homage for Jurassic fans as well.
Plus the flea circus music underneath that, dude.
Yes. Yeah, I scribbled down a note
Complete
here saying
homage,
that the school's spot on. And I also, I liked how, and I don't know if you clocked this, they changed the cinematography a little bit from Jurassic World. So in this, you could actually see more of the thatched roof as well, and more of the overarching shape of the visitor center. Yeah. Whereas in Jurassic World, it's just the gates, which I thought was really cool.
It's just like lower half,
Yeah. And I like how it kind of, as you go into the visitor center, it takes the moments to actually sort of refresh your memory around it. So you get a shot of the T-Rex skull you get a shot of the mural on the wall with the velociraptor, and you kind of get a moment to sort of relive in this environment, which was really,
Yeah.
really awesome.
You do get the ledge is broken from the
Yes.
Indominus attack. Like, so it's consistent. The
Yeah.
you know, the style is there. It's really cool to see.
And I think throughout this whole sequence, this really was, and I've got a note here, it just says big grin on my face during this sequence, because I really had that. There's so much in the way of homage during this. Like, you get the moment with Kenji with the vending machine trying to get something out of it, which is straight from Jurassic Park 3 in the InGen facility. And then also the fact that later in this sequence, when Blue comes in, or just before Blue comes in, you get the kids trying to climb up and get the compass back, and it kind of plays out in the exact opposite of Jurassic Park. So in the first film they're climbing down to escape, and in this one they're climbing up to escape. I just thought it was really well done, really well realized.
You mentioned Blue entering, and I'm like, you know, as soon as she came in, she taps her claw on the ground. I'm like, this is just so Jurassic, and I love that. And I did think about that reversal of the story there. That was pretty cool. That was a fun, like, I didn't expect anything, you know, bad to happen. You know, I know a lot of people put value on knowing that people are going to be fine, or, you know, there was no tension there, but there was still tension. I still find tension in moments where I know the characters are safe. Like, I never really think these characters are going to die, but like, there was still tension in that moment. They're all like frozen there, and Blue's underneath, and it was pretty cool. It was pretty cool. But like, this doesn't Darius do like literally the Owen thing? He's like,
yeah, that's a bit later.
Like, is it later? Is because I know he does it twice. I think he does it outside. At the truck maybe too. Yeah,
that's what you're thinking of, and then he does it inside the visitor center in a later episode. Yeah. There was one other note I made, actually, which is the fact that when they think... Actually, no, I think you're right, because they think that Blue's gone, but she's still there, isn't she? So I think that might happen in this moment as well, because there's a moment I like noted down where you have a shot that's got the silhouette of the... I can't think of the word, even though it's right in front of me and my eyes aren't spotting it, of the mural. You've got like the silhouette of the mural there, and you think it's just that painting, but then it transpires it's Blue coming back out. So I think that might be when they're inside, and then they have to run away.
I don't remember, because I think Blue gets a compy and then runs off, right? And then they leave, I think. So they try to go out to that truck, and but I don't know.
She's chasing them because she jumps on top of the truck.
Yeah.
So I think you get that moment where there's like the parallel with Owen, and you can kind of you see a lot more, not just in that moment, but in later moments as well, of how intelligent Blue is, which is really cool. Like you kind of get this insight into her sort of assessing what the threat is and thinking about it, which I thought was really cool.
Yeah. I did love that. They pick up that trank gun, which doesn't really help them in this moment, but at least they're aware of it. There's another portion in here, which is the secret lab, the E750 lab, which is a pretty big moment here. Like the fact that first off, it's a nice homage to Jurassic Park when the door opens and there's like the walkway down, the plankway down, and you're like, this is straight up, you know, Ellie or you know, entering you know, the maintenance tunnel thing in Jurassic Park. So they find this laptop in there, and there's just all these different logs, like I wrote them down, 239, 240, 257. So you get to learn like a little bit about the Scorpius Rex. That's where they first hear the name. And man, a huge revelation in this episode, right? You know, a huge revelation. Dr. Wu says, you know, he introduces the Scorpius Rex, the world's first hybrid dinosaur. And you're like, and I'm like, vindication. Sorry.
Well,
this is besides the point. We had a whole conversation on The Wire recently about the timeline of events with the Indominus, the Scorpius, and wondering when things were born and all that good stuff. And we were wondering if this was before the Indominus, and it was. And I'm like, my mind's blown. It was before.
Yeah.
It actually was before. So it's a complete change. And we talked about that earlier with the list, I think. Yeah, we were talking about the list earlier and how it's incomplete or, it's not showing all the same stuff. This is something that completely changes what you see, which I know Jack Ewan's made a big, or not a big, he made a response video to what we had said, and he mentioned that in the back door of Masrani Global that the Indominus Rex was born in 2012, and, it took 3 years to age to what you see in Jurassic World. But I don't know what to believe at this point because I don't know when. We don't have a firm timeline of events, right? We just know that Scorpius was first. So maybe it still could be 2012 and this thing was on ice for 3 years. I don't know. But I tend to look at it as, and I talked about, sorry, I keep talking, but I keep talking about face value and knowing that, like, hey, we see that Bumpy is rapidly aged within, a few weeks to a few months. And that's still kind of the way that I see these dinosaurs. And I kind of think of Indominus and Scorpius in that same manner, but that is all besides the point. We don't really get any kind of concrete information outside of the world's first hybrid dino, and that is huge news.
We do get more concrete information that you're not thinking of, and I'm about to blow your mind.
What's that?
So Wu says that Masrani said that it was too ugly to be shown to the public. So Masrani has ordered it to be destroyed. And Wu goes against his wishes to freeze it. So the reason why this isn't referenced on the back door is because it's in Jen's dirty little secret. It's been hidden by everyone, including people with access to the back door. Simon Masrani doesn't know that this was frozen. Wu is the only person who knows about it, and anyone who was working down there with him. So it wouldn't be on the back door.
I'm not asking for it to be on the back door. I'm just saying that, and I think it would still be there, to be honest, because there's like email conversations and stuff like that, right, on the back door between Dr. Wu and other people. So I don't know that it wouldn't be there, but anyway, it does kind of, in my mind, muddle Masrani a little bit with this whole conversation that Masrani's like, I don't like it. It's too, like you said, too ugly for display.
Yeah.
But Dr. Wu's going to continue. So it kind of makes that, I got to rewatch Jurassic World and look at that conversation he has with Dr. Wu, where he's like, what are you doing? What is this creation? It's a new revelation for him when he's talking about the Indominus Rex, you know? So it's, I don't know if in the back of his mind, he's thinking about Scorpius when he's having this conversation with Dr. Wu in Jurassic World. I got to see if it makes any kind of sense on the surface. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. So the way I interpreted it all is it's just done to underpin how out of touch Masrani is. So in Jurassic
That's the way I
World,
kind of did it. Yeah.
He has no idea what the genetic genome is of the Indominus. So that's probably the same here. He has no idea what he's requesting. He doesn't fully understand what Scorpius is. He's just thinking about the market value of it. And it's why he says it needs to be prettier, because he's just thinking about what will sell more tickets. He's not thinking about the implications and the science of it. So I think all of this is underpinning that Wu did a lot that Masrani didn't understand and he had no clue on. And I think equally it aligns Masrani a lot more with John Hammond, because it makes him come across a lot more as a character who's more concerned about the end experience than he is about safely getting there and actually understanding all the steps that have been taken to get there. It's that core Jurassic argument of they're trying to run before they can walk.
I think John at least had, like, I feel like he knew what was going on outside of the dinosaurs that we've read in the wild. Obviously, that was besides the point. But like he's like, my hand touches all of these dinosaurs that have been born on this island. Like, I think Jurassic World and the expansion between Lego and this show and stuff takes Masrani on that one quote where he's like, how's my park? How's it doing? Like, as if he has no clue what's going on. And he's some absurd, like, billionaire that just owns things but has no clue of the inner workings. And I don't know. I feel like they've expanded too much upon that and saying like he's just aloof and like he doesn't really understand things. But that's just me kind of, trying to work around how this actually fits because, like you said, I think it's just like he didn't really understand what was going on, and he forgot that he had mentioned, I need something bigger, more teeth or whatever, they say in that line. But like, I don't know. It's still interesting to discuss at least.
Yeah, honestly, for me, I look at it as it is something that's completely brushed under the rug. So
Mhm.
the way I interpret it is I look at the back door as projects that perhaps the public wouldn't be receptive to. So things like the Indominus Rex, where if the public learned about how much hybridization has gone into it, there might be a negative reaction. And I then think things like the Scorpius are a layer beneath that, where it's so far out of the realm of understanding of people like Masrani that Wu doesn't even want to keep backups of that anymore. It's all very, very hush hush behind closed doors. And I find it interesting to note that this might not be the only time he's done something like this. Because so throughout Camp Cretaceous, they've been very clear about not having text. If you've noticed, it's always like this weird squiggle. There's
Yeah.
three folders that you can clearly see on his laptop, which are W-600, N-601, and A-055. So that, to me, implies that there's been even more going on that he's continued to do, which I'm really like in context because it adds a lot to his modern day character and the fact that he's just continuing to build on the science he's doing without stopping to think about any of the ramifications.
Sure.
And that's
I feel like
ultimately
those
something
things,
that I think factors into Dominion.
those things could be like some of the stuff that we see on the screen in Jurassic World, whether it be
Yeah.
like the Stegoceratops or whatever that massive like dragon looking thing
Let
was,
me
like
actually.
stuff like that. It could be similar to those. I don't know if those numbers or words are on the screen at all when you see
I'm
that, but that
taking
could
a
be
look
interesting.
right now.
That could be interesting. But yeah, Masrani wants the Scorpius destroyed, but we discussed this a lot in season 2 about like why is there a cryogenic chamber? What is the deal here? But Dr. Wu essentially just wants to keep it in cryogenic suspension indefinitely until he can determine what went wrong with the thing, because they do mention that this thing, the mind is fragmented in the Scorpius, and it can turn from placid to aggressive in, from moment to moment. And, I'm thinking, at this point, we don't really have a good visual of the whatever it's called, Scorpius just yet, right? We're just still trying to piece together little end sequences at the end of episodes. So I'm thinking of the Indoraptor at this moment, and I'm like, wow, it does kind of sound like the Indoraptor, but maybe scarier. And interestingly enough, it attacks Dr. Wu, which is a huge point. I know a lot of people were like, oh, this is Dr. Wu's brother. I'm like, no, it's still just him. It's still Dr. Wu. But they have anti-venom there that'll help get rid of the symptoms, I guess.
It's almost as if that factors into the story later.
Oh yeah, maybe we'll see.
I do just want to touch on something quickly that I found very interesting in episode 3. So obviously now we're talking more about the presence of the E750. The kids find out about it. Wu knows about it. Therefore, Mills and his people know about it.
Oh, okay.
There's the potential that Manticore also know that Wu was experimenting with hybrids, because we see a drone at the end of episode 3. Fly in and see the 750 before it gets attacked by it. Now, you could argue that was Wu investigating the island, but this is never referenced by him, and Manticore are introduced as a drone in season 1. So I would bet that Manticore are also aware on E750. Keep that in mind, Brad, because it's going to factor into some speculation later.
Okay, yeah. I think visually speaking, you have to assume that it is Manticore. I know, you could question whether it is, Dr. Wu or Mills or whoever, but like at that point, you see the same kind of drone. You're like, okay, that's Manticore. So it does, like, this whole time we've been wondering, like, what are they doing? But like 6 or however many months later, you're like, they can't still be offshore at this point, right? Like, do they just keep coming back? I'm so confused by Manticore. Maybe that's something we get in the future. But we'll talk about that more. So
we'll speculate more.
We'll
about
go
the future.
to episode 5. So episode 5 is I think a pretty big one, right? So this is the introduction of the true introduction of the Scorpius,
the Gallimimus,
right?
in Camp Cretaceous.
Yeah. Well, okay. Well, that's first off. Wait, go back. We're going back to the beginning. The Gallimimus gets killed there, right? So but also, I cannot believe you, Camp Cretaceous, DreamWorks. Why do you keep killing Brachiosaurs in front of my eyes? Why do you keep doing this to me? There's this big stampede somewhat early in the episode, and like I see them, the two fallen Brachiosaurs. Yeah. But yeah, I just couldn't believe it. I'm like, again, no, don't do that again. The Scorpius just takes one out, and you don't see it, but like you see it fall in the trees, like, so it's brutal. This show is brutal this season, and that Gallimimus kill, which you brought up the Gallimimus, which this kind of skips ahead, I think, a little bit later. But Darius is out in the jungle, like taking his little field notes on the Gallimimus, and I think this is the point where he like looks up in a tree or something, and it just, there's a dead Gallimimus falls. Like, I'm like, oh my God, that is brutal. Like, that is so gross and horrifying.
I really like the visual of this, like, predator stowing its prey in the trees, because I know that there's parallels with real life, but also in Primeval season 1, when they introduce the future predators, which are like the big bad of that show, that starts by this animal hunting cattle and leaving them in trees. So I really like how that instantly hits that like horror vibe. Also worth noting here is the fact that this is the first time that we actually, as an audience, get to see sequences unfold through the eyes of a dinosaur from a first-person perspective. And the thing that's done here to distinguish this animal from other hybrids as well is the fact that it hunts based on heat vision, and so it looks for thermal signatures, which is really, really cool to see, and it kind of adds to that horror vibe because it makes it feel tonally very similar to more classic horrors or sci-fi horrors like Predator.
Predator, so I was like, you're getting very Predator vibes in this.
But yeah, so we spend some time with the Gallimimus, like you said. Darius is out seeing it. While he's flicking through his field book, we do get a drawing of a Dilophosaurus at one point, which means that he must have encountered them on Isla Nublar. And the fact they're not in season 3 thinks it's just me. I genuinely at this point think it's Universal going, hey, the Dilophosaurus still exists. Keep your eyes out in the future. So I reckon that dinosaur's going to be in Dominion. And
I actually wondered if that is in the boat, because like skipping way ahead to literally the finale. Like I did wonder, that was one of the things that crossed my mind, because there is something in this boat, and it's got to be small, but like I have other theories on that too. So
are you ready for me to blow your mind with that? And we'll get into a full-blown discussion on this later, but I'm going to say 2 words.
Okay.
Asexual reproduction. Okay, so moving on.
I know, yeah. Oh, I know. I know. That's where I'm going too.
Cool. So essentially what this boils down to is in the later half of the episode, the kids can't get to the boat because it's too stormy for it to take off. Yaz goes and scouts it out and realizes this. So they have to fortify the remains of Camp Cretaceous. And in doing so, the Scorpius Rex comes and attacks them. It's nighttime, it's in the middle of a storm, there's lightning, and this sequence to me felt so much tonally like the end of Fallen Kingdom, like with this cinematography where you just see the animal silhouetted, and then there's this moment where you first hear it roar, and it stood on its hind legs with a flash of lightning in the background. It's just... cinematically, like I say, it feels like they really went for those more mature tones this season, and it got to the point where I saw this and was like, I'm going to have to text my colleague and tell her son might be a bit scared of this season.
Yeah, this is like another one of those really bold moments for me. It's like this was so fast paced and like so much happening. You're worried about the storm, you're worried about the boat, all the characters in different places and stuff. And that Scorpius showing up at their camp and just not caring about that electric fence at all, really.
Yeah.
Just kind of getting shocked, but essentially not caring. And you know, all these different elements coming into play. You just talked about the thermal, heat vision, and the fact that this thing somehow can get into a tree and just attack from above.
Yeah.
It's so creepy. And it takes this base element of what you see as the Indoraptor and makes it somehow so much more monstrous than it already was as an Indoraptor, because they're very similar. It's like you can tell they're the same kind of creation, the same kind of project, but like this thing is everything that was wrong. Like the Indoraptor is essentially the perfected. It's still not perfected, but they had planned to go to the perfected route with Blue. But this is the initial concept that is just wrong. Everything is wrong about it. That scream is horrifying. The legs, dude. The legs look like they could break at any moment. They are so skinny and tall and long and lanky and weird. This thing almost has humanesque qualities to it at times, where you're like, this is very JP4 centric kind of weird. Like, where are we going with this? The fact that, dude, that shot that you mentioned about the lightning and that thing, it has its arms like in this weird position. It's roaring upwards and it just is standing. And you're like, my
it's
mind
almost
is blown
like a
at this moment.
hunchback, isn't it, in that scene?
It's so, everything about it is odd. And you're like, this thing is a monster. It is purely a monster at this moment. And I loved every moment of that. And, you know, I was getting hyped, you know, rewatching this, and I posed, you know, a question on Twitter to everybody about like, what do you guys think about the horror elements of the second half of Fallen Kingdom? And I was like, I want you guys to be prepared. Let's start the conversation. What do you think about those horror elements? Not alluding to Camp Cretaceous whatsoever, but I just wanted to know in preparation, what did people think about, you know, the Frankenstein-esque vibe? We get Frankenstein like a quote kind of in this show as well. We get Dracula vibes in Fallen Kingdom and Wolfman vibes, and this is all of those things together, and it was so everything I wanted from this creature. It was so amazing, and the fact that it gets distracted by fire was a really cool detail, and such a horror monster trope in a way. It was really interesting because like Frankenstein or Frankenstein's monster is just like hates fire and stuff like that. So that is like a really cool detail, I thought.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think they did a lot of legwork to really make this stand out compared to the Indominus and the Indoraptor. And I think that was the challenge here. And that was something I was worried about last season, is how do you make another hybrid feel different? And they really managed to. And at the end of this episode, we get the gut-wrenching moment, which kind of confirms what we've been thinking this whole time. So in every segment where you see a dead animal, there's essentially quills in the animal. And you're kind of wondering, well, why are they there? What's the purpose of them? And this confirms that because it's taken from the namesake, the scorpion fish, which we find out later in the show, that this animal has got poisonous quills that it leaves in its prey. And we discover this when they're embedded in Sammy, and the episode ends with her with these 3 quills in her stomach. And I found that to be quite a gut-wrenching graphic, actually, because when you think about suffering an injury, like one of the worst places you think of is your stomach. So seeing that there was kind of in itself very, very brutal.
Yeah, it was very, very brutal. This is such a dark moment. And again, I figured, everybody would be fine. They would obviously find this anti-venom and everything would be good because they're not killing off a kid on a show like this. I just, that's never crossing my mind as a thing that will actually happen. But it was still like a very traumatic experience, I think. And just speaking of that scorpion fish, I did, I wanted to like look it up a little bit. So it literally, like, the first line on Wikipedia is like, it's a family of mostly marine fish that include many of the world's most venomous species. And it's like, there you go. That's like, why, Dr. Wu? Why are you doing these things? Like, come on, man. It's just, so it's brutal. And you see those things stuck in there and she faints and you're like, this is going to be bad. But I'm sure they'll get out of it. But that takes you right into the next episode, which is where they just try to figure that all out and try to set off to correct those issues, which is expected.
I find it quite interesting that the animal itself is poisonous as well, and you're kind of slowly witnessing Sammy die, because that toxin sort of spreading through her is almost a metaphor for the impact that the Scorpius is having on Isla Nublar, where we learn that as it's slowly been spreading more and more across the island, it's been ruining the ecosystem, and all of the animals are behaving in really unnatural ways. So I like how there's sort of a lot of symbolism packed into this season, and you can really kind of draw connections between a lot of different things. I thought that was handled really, really well through this.
Yeah, he assumes that, like, in the last episode, in episode, what was that, 5 or so, like, he just is like, this has got to be why all the animals are acting weird, and you're like, okay, that's cool. I can understand the Tyrannosaurus now, where maybe I thought it was like, okay, that's crazy. I don't understand it, but it's fun, but it's wild. But now you kind of get it, and you see that continually happening throughout the season. Yeah. It's like, wow, they are all acting odd.
And it also maybe even explains some of the more extreme behaviors in the last season, because the Scorpius could have been loose at the time when they were doing that. You don't know for sure. I mean, obviously, we see the season end with the room venting, but...
Yeah, I think it's still intact at that point, okay. and then it ends, and then it escapes when we're not looking, because it skips ahead a little bit, and... So obviously, I mean, like, it's 2 to 3 months at the end of that season, and then another 3 months goes by. So these kids are just like, there's so many experiences in there that we're not seeing. So who knows? But
episode 6, I didn't really have too many notes on. I thought Watch Point getting destroyed was interesting. Obviously, we saw it coming, and we've already touched on that a little bit. And then the only real notes I made was the fact that we get to see the raptor paddock again, which I thought was fun. And I also really like the moment of the kids using the leaves to protect themselves from the pteranodons. I thought that was quite a cool use of, like, natural camouflage. Again.
Go
ahead.
No, go ahead. No, I was going to change it to a different topic, but if you're good.
Go for it.
I think it's a good episode for Yaz too, because really it's all about her trying to save somebody who she just said we're not friends. And that's like one of my little nitpicks with the season is I think overall the characters really grow exponentially, but like this is one of those moments where things revert, I think maybe Ben I think Ben and Darius maybe have a similar conversation this season where they're like, we wouldn't be friends, when we get back home or whatever. Yaz says the same thing. And it's like, what? You already had this conversation with Sammy where you guys talked about not being friends. Why are you friends? And then you all of a sudden not friends again. I'm like, okay, that's a little weird. Felt a little off. But she's remembering all these good moments she had with Sammy and all these bad moments she had with her to help her have this driving force to get her friend back to a healthy state. And I thought it was still good to see, even though I thought the way that they got there was a little clunky.
Yeah.
We get to see that gondola station explode, which is pretty good. So there's like a little encounter again with the Scorpius. And it's just another moment where this thing is insane because it makes this jump over the river that's in the land, because they used to use this river to traverse, or this cutout area to traverse the land. But now there's a river there from the storm. So this Scorpius can make leaps and bounds. It's hiding in trees again. It's still just super creepy, as always.
Yeah, no, I
But
agree
yeah,
with
you're
that.
right. Nothing too much else though.
I think overall it was quite cool, and this is something I alluded to in my non-spoiler review, is the fact that there's a lot more adult themes in this, because
Mm,
this is kind of Yaz dealing with guilt, and that's something that I think all of us deal with from time to time. So I thought it was really cool how it sort of explored that quite thoroughly. I thought it was just nice seeing themes that resonated a lot throughout this season.
yeah,
Um, and on the subject of themes that resonate, episode 7 is very much focused on Ben and Ben's relationship with Bumpy, and also Darius, and Ben not wanting to leave Bumpy. And I thought
yeah,
that was really cool because you kind of get that parallel with Owen and Blue in some ways, and Owen not being sure about what to do at the end of Jurassic World for a moment before he lets her go off. You're kind of
hmm
seeing that sort of similar dynamic played out in a lot more detail here, which I thought was awesome.
yeah. I thought that dynamic was interesting. I'm like, Ben, come on, man. What do you just get over this? But like, I did love that Bumpy found a family. Like, or,
Yeah,
she had a family because she was introduced into the population and then got scattered from them. During the events of Jurassic World, but now I guess she refound that family, and that's really nice to see. Is like this, big herd of Ankies there, and she just is, welcomed into that crew. And for me, I'm like, okay, that's how you separate the two of these characters, Bumpy and Ben. It's, but he's just insistent that this is his home, and he doesn't want to leave the
well, is
island.
it
But
himself Jungle Man?
yeah, he's like, I'm my stronger self here, and he
Yeah,
constantly brings up Toro. I defeated Toro, which I'm actually shocked we didn't get another Toro
yeah,
cameo here. I was certain Hap didn't die, and maybe he still didn't, but I was also certain that like Toro would still be alive, and because they kept mentioning it, like, guys, don't you know I defeated Toro? And I was like, I was expecting at the end of the season that Toro would be like, and they'd all be like, Ben, we thought you defeated Toro, and he's like, I thought I did too, and you're like, no, you didn't, but that never happened. So,
no,
but I thought this was a
Toro
pretty,
just got chowed down on by a bunch of compies while he was
I guess
lying at the
so,
bottom of that
yeah.
cliff.
I thought this was a pretty good episode though because of the conflict and the emotion attached
Yeah,
to these characters between Ben and Darius, because Darius is continually trying to make up for his past mistake of letting Ben go, and he's constantly feeling like Ben is judging him or just like hating him for that. But they end up getting into a fight, and I'm like,
yeah.
wow, this is actually like they're Ben literally came, moments from punching Darius like in the face, and you're like, wow, this is pretty, a heavy moment for these characters. I thought that was pretty good, to see them physically trying to grapple with this situation. I just spit everywhere,
Yeah.
but and then almost coming to to blows there with fists, and you're like, oh wow, like that was brutal.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. You see some cracks forming in the group at different points in the season, and this is perhaps one of them. And then you see that more later on in the season as well. I don't know why I've suddenly gone so bright. I'm like really
It's
illuminated now.
you have your notes up, which is just a white screen. That's why. Take your notes off, then you got nothing to talk about. But
I,
yeah,
I was gonna say, going back to Bumpy with the Ankylosaurus herd, I really loved how the herd fended off the Scorpius, because that's straight out of real
mm,
life paleontology. I remember the Walking with Dinosaurs Ballad of Big Al special explores how the
mm,
Allosaurus was unable to attack a group of sauropods because they were herded together, so they were
mhm,
protecting each other and protecting their young. And I thought it was
yeah,
really cool to see that mentioned here. And I also liked how this sort of emphasizes that the Scorpius is much dumber in some regards than the Indominus Rex. Because
uh
obviously
huh,
the Indominus works out that it can twist the Ankylosaurus over and then attack its stomach. And you see that the Scorpius doesn't figure that out. It just kind of
yeah,
sort of goes on its own way. Um,
yeah,
and then obviously a little bit later in the episode, we get the line saying, "Oh, how did the Scorpius end up here so quickly? It was just over by these
Yeah.
characters."
Must
Until
be the
the
fastest
ultimate,
dinosaur ever.
yeah, yeah, until the ultimate reveal that it isn't the fastest dinosaur ever because
Yeah.
there's two of them. What did you think of that, Brad?
My mind was blown. I did not expect two of them. Did you expect two of them at all? Because that
No.
was not on my radar at all. I didn't initially think of the consequence of it. I was just like, oh, what is going on? Are you for real? There's a second one? I'm like, that is crazy. Ultimately I was like, oh, I wish it was like a white one and the darker color one. I thought that would have been cool, like kind of like an allusion to like behind the scenes of Fallen Kingdom and stuff like that, and that could have been really cool to see. But they were so similar. There may have been a slight difference. It was hard to tell, but you don't really get into that more until the next episode. But I was just like, whoa, what is happening here? That's crazy. Two of them.
Yeah.
It took what we initially were talking about, like this concept that could be world breaking in a way, and doubled down on it. And I'm like, what?
It was
That's crazy. I can't
ballsy.
believe you did this. Yeah, bold.
One thing I will say is, so we'll get into episode 8 in a second, but very early in episode 8, it's mentioned that presumably the animal can self-reproduce, and that's how there's two of them. It took me a while to put the dots together and work out that it had been like 3 months since it had broken out. Because at first I was like, how the hell is it just given birth to a full-size Scorpius Rex?
Yeah. yeah. I thought that for a second too. And I'm like, okay, yeah, it's been, processing in my mind. It's been about 3 months. So therefore, what I was talking about before, we saw Bumpy get to that size in about 3 months. So therefore, all dinosaurs must do this. So that is the concept. And that's kind of shown here again, another instance of, it could get to this size. Now, maybe this thing could get bigger. Maybe. But it was still, I still think the Scorpius was like a little bit bigger than the Indominus. It's hard to say. No, I'm sorry, not the Indominus. The Indoraptor. The Indoraptor.
The Indoraptor and the Indominus, yeah.
It was maybe a little bigger, but it was hard to tell. The Indoraptor is pretty big too, but it was just, I was like, okay, I buy it. I'm in. It's a very surface level explanation, and I'm okay with it because that's how it's always been. Really, it's never been much more than that. So I was good with it. But they create havoc here in this fight sequence, which was really fun,
And that's the interesting thing, actually. So we start episode 8 with the two of them fighting, and I really like that because that calls back to the Indominus and her sibling and the fact that she killed her sibling. So it kind of shows that Wu still hasn't perfected the science. He's still tinkering. He still can't quite get these pack behaviors right, which I thought was really cool. And did you also clock the limo in the tree here being kind of a visual callback to the Ford Explorer as well?
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah. And I had just recently rewatched Battle at Big Rock too, and I was visually, because like they were strapped in to the limo seats and hanging, and I was like, oh my god, they look like that kid from Battle at Big Rock that's stuck in the chair, against in the camper. And I love that like there's this really dramatic thing. It's like, Darius wants to take, he's like, we got to take them out. We can't leave this the way it is. It's terrible for the ecosystem there. And Darius is like, in order to do what we have to do, we have to go back to where it all began. And I'm like, I love that. Cause like, it's a fun statement. It's a fun idea. And I'm like, yes, let's go back to where it all began. Cause we always want to go back there,
Yeah. But Brad, before we go back there, we get a baby version of your favorite animal.
Yeah. Oh, it's so cute.
Now
was
imagine
like a big
if the grown-up one is
too,
the Fallen Kingdom one.
No, it can't. No. Wait, you mean the one like
enhanced growth?
Like no way. That's literally like days later. But what if it's the mom, dude? Come on.
No, Brad. Look, Brad. The opening's only days later. But the actual events of Fallen Kingdom...
the movie. Yeah, you're right. Okay, yeah. All right, dude. I'm so mad at you now. I am so mad at you.
So thank you for joining us for another episode of the Jurassic Park podcast.
Why do you do this to me?
So, yeah, you make a really interesting point about Darius's attitude as well, because there's one line that I pulled out, which is, why should we care what happened to the dinosaurs? Because life is worth protecting. And I think that's going to
that was
be
Kenji. Kenji,
yeah,
right?
so that's Kenji and Brooklyn during that same sort of sequence. And I think that is really, really interesting because I think that's setting the stage for Dominion. Now, obviously, if you're obsessive like us, then you might have looked at the IMDb castings and you can see that there's Washington scenes. So presumably, we might be going back to the Senate hearings that we saw in Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom. And if we are, then I imagine that these kind of tones will be the discussions that will be had. Why should we care about these animals being in our world? Why should we want to preserve them? Why do they matter? So I think that this does a really good job at kind of getting you to think about what discussions will be happening around Dominion as well, which I thought was really, really cool.
You know, besides that point, but speaking of Kenji and Brooklyn, I was kind of getting vibes that like maybe they could potentially be a couple or something in the future, because like Kenji is really, I felt like he's trying to impress her and stuff like that throughout this. And like really, they were really growing their relationship a lot here. And like, you know, he had that kind look towards her when he repeated that line, that life is maybe worth protecting. And I was like, oh, that's a really sweet moment, you know? And there's several moments like, and this is kind of skipping ahead, but like he's like gripping to her during like that Anki herd scene, you know, later on. And he's really protective about, you know, her later on too. So it's pretty interesting. I think there might be something developing.
There is that moment later on where she leaves him to go and see Darius, and then he's off with Darius afterwards as well. So
yeah,
I think you're onto something there. This episode brings us our big nostalgia boost as well. So this would traditionally have been the finale, but there's 2 extra episodes tacked onto this season, which we'll get into in a moment.
Yeah,
but here,
episode 8, right? Yeah.
Yeah, so here we get to revisit again the visitor center. I was about to say the Velociraptor center. And in the visitor center, we have one Scorpius Rex inside, one Scorpius Rex on the roof, and we also have Velociraptor Blue. So it's kind of switching and paralleling the battle of the last film, where instead of one big theropod and 2 raptors, we now have a raptor up against these 2 hybrids, which I thought was really, really interesting. So already it's setting up this really, really cool.
They're up against themselves too. You know, like it's a free for all. Like nobody, there's no allegiance here. It's just like every man for himself, every dino for himself in that moment. It's crazy.
And just before we get to that climactic encounter in the kind of atrium of the visitor center, where do we go back to, Brad?
I'm trying to look at my notes really quick. The dock? I don't know. The
kitchen.
Where do we go?
The kitchen.
The kitchen. Yeah. Okay.
So during this sequence in the kitchen, we get the remade shot that's been released as a bit of promotional art already of the Scorpius looking through the window. And you get this really cool moment where it tries the lock, so it makes the handle move, and then walks away rather than opening it and just bursts through, which I thought was really, really cool.
Again, it kind of goes back to what you were saying about it not being able to break through the herd, and so it's not as smart as other things. It's like, I can't figure out how to open this door. Let me just smash it down. Like now I'm just a brute, you know. So I thought that was pretty awesome, and it's just showcasing how different of a creature it is versus the Velociraptors. The Velociraptors go in there so cautiously and, you know, looking at everything and making sure they're taking it all in. This thing goes in and is knocking over absolutely everything. It's a menace inside this kitchen. And I just found that really, like, you know, a stark difference from the original movie.
Yeah, I thought it was deliberately done to kind of play off those differences. And the cool thing here as well is the fact that when we go back into the atrium, there's a moment where Darius is reaching for the tranquilizer gun to
Mhm.
try and shoot the Scorpius, and Blue kind of looks at him, and you can see her working out that it's a weapon. He doesn't
Yeah,
pick
yeah,
it
yeah.
up, so she then goes, "Oh, he's not a threat," and attacks
Yeah.
the Scorpius instead. And I thought that
Yeah.
was cool. And there's a lot of parallels with how she attacks that, with how she attacks both the Indominus and how the Raptors attack the T-Rex, with her getting up on its back and sort of
Yep.
attacking from out of its range, which was really cool to see.
Yeah. It's a little, on the nose, the whole Darius doing this arm thing,
It's
I'm
literally
like,
like
it's a little,
I'm sure he says the
it's,
exact same line as Owen at one point as well.
I don't know, but like, I thought it was interesting because like he never, at least as far as we know, saw Owen or saw any kind of training experience or anything. So I found it interesting that he just, automatically goes to like this position where he's like holding it off. Ultimately all he's doing is showing like, I'm not a threat. And that's
Yeah.
what you do. You hold your hands up. You're like, okay, I'm not going to touch it. I'm not going to touch that weapon there. It's fine. So he, Blue understands that. Blue is a smart dinosaur, so she kind of understands. But dude, this entire fight sequence was insane. It was
Yeah.
brutal, and it was just it reminded me a bit of the novel too, in a way, where like raptors are on the roof. You hear about raptors being on the roof
Yeah.
of the visitor center and stuff like that. And I felt very, it felt very similar to that. And obviously it's supposed to be similar to that battle in the first movie, but like I was also getting those novel vibes too. And I was like, this is so bold to go in there and destroy the visitor center.
Yeah.
Completely destroy it. I'm
I
like,
think
wow, that's bold,
I can see some people not taking that so well. But
Yeah.
I thought it was really cool because it underpins Wu as a character fundamentally, and it says, look, you had this thing, you did something incredible with Jurassic Park, but you kept going and going, you kept pushing those boundaries, you never thought about the consequences, and now your work has destroyed your legacy. And it's
Yeah.
very metaphorical because obviously in Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom, he has literally been stripped of his title. He's now
And
like this
we'll
rogue
get to that.
scientist.
We're gonna get
Um,
to that in a little bit too.
yeah, so it's very cool seeing how this again is a metaphor for the franchise as a whole, and how hybrids in many ways have
Mhm.
destroyed the legacy of Jurassic
Yeah.
Park. I think
Yeah.
that's a very, very cool thing. Um,
Yeah.
so we
It's
end with the go ahead.
No, yeah, I was just gonna kind of say the same thing about, the collapse bringing down, which, technically you only do see one Scorpius dead. So, I mean, look, there's the potential that there's another one still
Yeah.
alive, but when you see the rocks falling down, you do see, or the ceiling falling, you do see like both of them being collapsed under there. So I'm just saying, I only saw one officially dead, but you never know.
So what we know from the end of this sequence is that there's now hybrid carcasses on the island,
Hmm.
and Manticore know that there were hybrids on the island. So it is
Sure.
possible that they could recover those from the wreckage of the visitor center, which
Yeah.
would be again quite interesting because then it would literally be the legacy of InGen breeding a brand new company. So
Yeah. Well, what kind of crossed through my mind is the fact that I didn't see the second dead creature. In my
yeah,
mind, I kind of envision a future where these kids are on the boat going back to the mainland, and all of a sudden they see a chopper go by, like in the Lost World or in Fallen Kingdom, and you see, like in Fallen Kingdom, you see these dinosaurs tranked and just hanging
yeah.
there as they're transporting them away. I could totally see something like that happening, where Manticore tracks it down, picks one up, and takes it away, whether it is dead or another one alive or something.
Yeah.
But I could totally
And
see
then
that
their
kind of thing
mission
happening.
becomes stopping Manticore. So that's how you set
Yeah.
up another season. I like it, Brad. That's
Yep,
really cool.
exactly. That's exactly what I was thinking, and that maybe their home operations are on Sorna. I don't know. You know, it could be fun. It could be fun, but that's just
So-
speculation, of course.
It's all right. We'll do plenty more of that at the end of this episode. Don't you worry. I also like how I've basically just started running us through every episode at this point.
That was not my intention, everybody. Just so you know, that was not my notes, but he went with it. So I'm like, okay, that's what we're doing.
Yeah. Yeah. So, this episode ends with the kids making it onto the boat and making it off of the island. And just as they're getting away, we have 3 helicopters swoop in.
Before that, they decide to let Ben figure himself out a little bit. This is the moment where like Ben is contemplating what to do, or not he's not even contemplating. Like you see the characters are like, should we leave him? Are we really leaving him? Is this what we're doing? And he stays and he goes back into the jungle and he's like, I'm here to stay. And then looks around and he's like, no, I don't want to do this. And like you see him jump into the water and the kids were, they didn't cue in Sammy on the plan, I guess. But everybody's like, we knew you would come back. Like, we knew it was only a matter of time. That's why we stayed right here or whatever. So I thought that was pretty good. But the whole time I'm like, Ben, stop it. Stop. Don't do this. What are you doing? You can't.
You're like, just go. Just leave.
Leave. Come on. Don't let this linger anymore. Like, leave the island. These kids need to leave. So yeah, but then you said the spotlight. The choppers roll in.
Yeah.
And at that moment, man, I'm like, oh my god, they're doing it. It's gonna happen. It is gonna happen.
Well, at this moment, I was still like, okay, it could be a red herring.
No, I was
because
it
felt like to me it felt like, have you seen like the way the military do pirate interdiction operations? That was the kind of vibe I got, where you've got like this sharp spotlight, this helicopter circling. So I was like, maybe this is the military, maybe it's some other kind of operation.
Yeah, restricted, and it's like, yeah.
And then we get into episode 9.
Mm-hmm.
And at this point, we kind of get some hints at something shady's going on. So obviously the kids say these are unmarked choppers. They begin to question whether they can really trust them, but they decide it's their best chance of getting off of the island. So they go back onto the island. One of the helicopters comes in and lands to pick them up. You get the mercenary who comes out saying, what the hell are you kids doing on this island anyway? Half of the kids get onto the chopper, and then the T-Rex turns up. And the chopper kind of lifts off as the T-Rex attacks. Mm-hmm. And the thing in this moment that blew my mind and shows how just invested in this franchise these guys are is the fact that was literally the original storyboards for Jurassic Park to a T. With the escape helicopter lifting off and the landing struts getting bitten by the T-Rex. I lost my mind and I shouted at my telly and was like, oh my God, they did the original scene.
It was amazing. And but that Rex also took out one of the mercs that was down there. And I was like, oh my God, like they just like full force just ate that guy. It was awesome. It was like, at this point, the kids, they've been in some rough situations, but right now I'm like, oh my God, now they're witnessing so much death up close and personal. It's crazy. Like, it just amps it up. And then, you in a few minutes, you get that moment where you hear one of the mercs in the background say like, Marine 1, you're like,
dude, I lost it. Because at this point I was like,
all right,
okay,
confirmed.
Yeah, I was literally like, maybe it's still going elsewhere. And then you hear, Marine 1, I need to shut the gate. Marine 1. And I was like, oh my God. And then the fact that they actually do that sequence in the show, I was just like, I was gone at this point. I was away in Jurassic heaven, really, really happy at this point.
Yeah, it was incredible to see that all transpire again. A little bit of me was like, we're going to see the Dilophosaurus, but like that obviously didn't pan out. But like, because you hear the Dilophosaurus, like the squeal, like the little noise it makes in Fallen Kingdom somewhere. It's just like there for some reason. But yeah, to see that all actually happen, like nearly shot for shot there, that was so cool. And then just incredible that these kids were just standing on the ledge watching that happen. Like the mosasaur jumps out and grabs that guy. It's like, oh,
Yeah.
it was amazing. It was so awesome. You know,
It was such an
it was like a
incredible way to
dream
put it
come true.
together.
Yeah.
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 And we get we get confirmation of the time window. Well, we sort of get confirmation of the time window, don't we, Brad?
Yeah, I mean, you know, we did a lot of speculation that sort of before all this, like, you know, who would come back here, what would happen, why would they all be here? But they did mention that, yeah, it's like the kids were like, how long, or somebody says, how long you been here? And they're like, I don't know, since Jurassic World fell. And the pilot's like, that's about 6 months ago. It's like, it's still vague. It's still vague. Like, you know, we don't know exactly, but it's around 6 months ago. So I was like, okay, cool. All right, at least we know where we're at, and we did have that conversation with Scott Kramer about that timeline as well. And you know, it's pretty concrete at this point, and it's still interesting that like nobody ever said that in Fallen Kingdom. That was never a thing that was like, you know, you're supposed to know or have any idea about. But I love that it's, you know, it's more concrete now, and Dr. Wu is there to salvage this whole thing and to get his information, and specifically like going back to that room where E750 was. And you know, I kind of hoped, you know, that this is exactly the way it would go down when we saw that in Fallen Kingdom. I think you said
this word for word in the episode that we didn't get to release.
Yeah, I did. If I didn't say it, if you didn't hear it there, I definitely said it elsewhere, that like I had hoped that like Wu came back to salvage whatever, you know, materials he needed, and also to clean up E750 and to figure that out. And you know, I don't know, maybe he would have left it there ultimately, but like he did want the documentation and the information that is on his computer and stuff. So,
yeah.
But I was very, very pleased that like he wanted to salvage this mission, and he is back there in person to get his stuff. And I thought that was really awesome.
Yeah, I thought it was really well handled, and I'm not sure if you clocked it, but there was a little bit of lore that feeds into the Indoraptor as well. And because he's talking to Hawks, I think it is, or it might be Brooklyn at this point, and he says that without his laptop, it will take what would take them months to do will take years. So this explains why in Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom, so many years later, the Indoraptor is still only a prototype at the Lockwood Manor auction, because he never got that data. And I like how it it factors into his ignorance and his arrogance as a character as well, because you think he's done all of this important research. He hasn't thought to back it up on a portable hard drive.
None of that makes any sense, but I'm there for the idea and the plan, and I love the payoff, man. I love, because I was thinking that same thing. I'm like, oh my God, okay, this is why it's 3 years later, because it takes time for him to come up with the data, because he didn't have it. You know, it's really, it pays off beautifully. And then the kids, because he didn't have that data, they set off to like steal the laptop ahead of time. They end up getting there ahead of him and pass, you know, but in the meantime, Brooklyn gets captured. And, you know, it was a pretty awesome. I think you had said, did you compare it to like Endgame or something like that? Like,
yes, where they're like whatever it takes.
Whatever it takes. Yeah, it was like pass off the laptop and go wipe it and copy. But they changed the plan so many times about like what they're doing and all this stuff. But like eventually they decide to like copy the data so that they can take him down, I think, and then also give him back a blank laptop. But you know, plans still went askew and stuff like that. But yeah, I forget what else happened specifically, because that is all more so in the next episode, I believe.
That's kind of across that. The rest of episode 9 really is the Pteranodon attack, which is really, really cool. So you see this helicopter heading to the rendezvous point, and then there's a swarm of pteranodons who kind of take flight, and you're kind of in your head, you're already thinking, oh no, because you know how the sequence in Jurassic World played out. But then Ben says to turn the lights off, and they leave the vehicle alone, which was quite cool, I thought.
This is one of those moments where I'm like looking at the character developments here, and I'm like, oh my God, this is amazing. These kids, are like they're the boss. Like they know everything that's happening here. They know how to deal with all the situations, and they're like, shut down the lights. I know it's gonna work. So
Your Ben
I loved
impression
it.
is flawless.
I know. I work on it all the time. But yeah, I thought that whole chopper sequence was interesting. The fact that first off, the pilot is gone. Like that's kind of brutal.
Wow.
But like it's very, very simulating the the explorer in the tree kind of moment here as well.
Yeah. I'm gonna skip over that for now because I want to speculate on the pilot at the end.
Okay.
Because I have some interesting observations about
Ooh.
that. Okay, so I'm looking through episode 10 notes. Go ahead.
Before we get there, they're at the lab and they're having conversations, and the Merc finds out about the Scorpius Rex, and that's where you find out about the scorpion fish name and all that stuff.
Yes.
But it's pretty interesting because he's like, the boss would be really interested in this, and he's like, well, Dr. Wu says, I could perfect it, I could make an improved version, and that's where he's like, what would take months will take years. And then I love that
Wu
Wu
impression's good as well. You're like nailing all of them.
But Wu, now you're gonna force my hand here. I got to do it again. You said it too early. Now I'm gonna mess up. But he's like, if you don't want Mills to have your head, help me look. So I love that Mills is referred to here, and it combines all of my hopes and dreams. I've been talking about this for years about how I've really wanted all of this stuff to be connected, and it's really connecting dots even further, and I just love it so much. It's awesome to hear all these things, across multiple platforms and different films and different mediums. It's really, really cool. So,
so
Brooklyn even says, or no, I'm sorry, Darius, maybe he says like, this Mills guy wants him to create monsters or whatever. And I'm like, oh, that's like
it's
another,
literally preluding Fallen Kingdom.
Yeah.
So I did want to give you a little interesting piece of speculation here. So there's 3 helicopters we see going in. One is heading with Wu to his lab to get the Scorpius Rex research.
Okay.
One is going to get the Indoraptor specimen. And the third one presumably had another mission before they have to land to get the kids. What if that third mission was the NMS facility from Jurassic World Aftermath?
I don't know. Maybe. You know more about that than I do, so I have no idea. Cool. Yeah. I like it. Okay. I like it.
We'll go with it then. Perfect.
Yeah.
So I had a few observations from episode 10 as well. Mainly the fact, so there's a few little cool parallels, like you get Hawks and the Mercenary using night vision goggles, which calls back to Jurassic World, and those brutal sequences with the Indominus. We see Chaos and Limbo.
They're pretty bad at using them, by the way.
What was that?
They're pretty bad at using these night vision goggles because they think kids are a bunch of...
Oh, but that moment was so cool where they thought that Chaos and Limbo were the kids, and then the like baryonyx just wake up, eat this dude, and then go back to sleep.
I love it. Even before that, though, like Wu is having like conversations with Brooklyn, and I feel like this is a good episode for Dr. Wu because he's not one-dimensional as always. Pretty much, I think that there's a bit of a softness to him here, where he was very concerned. He actually was kind of concerned, I think, for these campers. And he's like, you and the other campers never made it off the island. It's like, it kind of makes me think of the backstory that's happening off island about like him knowing these campers never made it off the island. And he didn't look hostile. He's always so hostile, in everything that he does. He's always so demanding and, demeaning to people. And I thought it was very interesting to have, he had like a much more heartwarming, like response to seeing Brooklyn and just like, having like normal conversations with her instead of being like, I am so much better than you at everything, like I thought that was pretty interesting to see a little bit of a different side to him.
It's cool because you kind of see a little bit of remorsefulness from Wu,
Hmm.
but then
Yeah.
ultimately he does still leave the kids behind. So you kind of get
Yeah.
this where you can see the seeds of maybe a redemption being planted, but then he like
Yeah.
switches back to the colder Wu we see in Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom. And actually,
Hmm.
I'm really glad you brought that up because I really like some of his dialogue here. It kind of nails this narcissistic sort of character that they've built up. And the thing I really love is the fact that he describes himself as a visionary. Like,
Hmm.
can you get more narcissistic than that in terms of the way he presents himself? I thought it was
Yeah.
really, really cool seeing them like narrowing down on that, and then Brooklyn beginning to pick away at that, and
Hmm.
kind of get him to reconsider things more. Um,
Yeah.
I
Yeah, I
think,
like that Brooklyn calls him Dr. Frankenstein, and
yeah,
I thought that was pretty cool.
it's that very like on the nose nod of you going, yeah, he's messing with things he doesn't understand
But
here, and he is very much that kind of character.
yeah, but he also makes like an interesting quote here because I after reading the book and understanding like a lot of philosophies surrounding monsters and animals and stuff like that, he actually says like, "See, my creations aren't monsters." And like, he talks about the parasaurs and stuff like that, how like
Yeah,
not everything I make is a monster, but he sees it differently, I think,
yeah,
than the reality. So
he's
I
like
don't know if
detached
he's
from reality.
yeah, but he like has these moments of like when she says Dr. Frankenstein, like that maybe he's understanding his role, but he just doesn't quite get his his implementation into what he's done and stuff. I don't know.
Yeah. I thought, and this is going in a completely different direction here as well, but I thought it was cool that they brought back the flash drive from season one and
Hmm.
made it like switched it so it was a
Yeah,
positive here. So in season
yeah,
one, it's the negative thing that divides the group, and here it's the thing
yeah,
that nearly saves Brooklyn. And it's interesting seeing how emotion is ultimately what almost gets Brooklyn taken away, essentially, because they had a concrete plan that was going to work, but it's the human element in the form of Kenji that causes the things to go awry because he tries to
hmm,
do things too quickly and causes those problems to ensue. And I think that's quite
yeah,
interesting because a lot of that theme, like throughout Jurassic more broadly, is unpredictability and things happening that we can't account for and we can't predict. And emotion is definitely one very big part of that.
yeah. Malcolm's like, yeah, you couldn't predict that Kenji would walk off with a laptop, and you're like, I guess I couldn't, yeah. But
So,
like, it's
listeners, this episode have got Dr. Wu, Ben, Andy, and Malcolm, all from the very talented Brad Jost.
cast me in your projects, everybody.
Or don't.
But no, it's what? Hey, okay. So I do like though it kind of continuing what I mentioned earlier about Kenji and Brooklyn, whatever
Yeah.
situation they've got going on. He mentions like towards the end of the episode, he's like, unlike you, I don't take risks with friends' lives or whatever. So
Yeah.
I think that was pretty interesting. Like I feel like there's a lot of feelings there for him with Brooklyn, but that's after he steals the thing. The laptop eventually gets destroyed.
Yeah.
So the documentation still exists. It's on that thumb drive because they did continue, to process that and, get the information off. So it makes me wonder about Dr. Wu and him essentially losing his accreditation, I guess.
Yeah.
I know that like through the DPG website, which we've kind of talked about, like some of these features are not connecting the dots fully anymore, but like there was this whole thing with like a Gene Guard Act and the Congress that they're opening up inquiry into Gene Guard Act, which, you can take what you will with that. But,
Yeah.
it says 3 months after the events of 2015 and a separate inquiry into bioethics misconduct perpetrated by InGen and Jurassic World geneticist Dr. Henry Wu. The U.S. Congress announced it would open up an inquiry into potential violations into that act. And then it also says later in a different article that Dr. Henry Wu recently stripped of all credentials after being found guilty of bioethical misconduct. And I believe that article was March 2018. So
Yeah.
they're saying recently he was found guilty of all these things. So it wasn't that 3 months after Jurassic World. So I don't know.
He's still
But it makes me
presented as a
wonder,
doctor at that point, isn't he? Like, he
in
still has
in
the
this
full doctor outfit and everything.
in what at what point?
In Camp Cretaceous.
In Camp Cretaceous, yes, he still says Dr. Wu or something like that. So he's still going by Dr. Wu. So I know that he hasn't been stripped yet. But it makes me wonder about that document, or the data that they took from the island. Did that have a lot of weight in removing his, credentials? I think that's a pretty interesting thing to tackle and to wonder if that's the case. Maybe it had nothing to do with it, but I like to think that these kids will eventually get that data to, safe hands and use it to help strip him of his doctorhood.
I'm calling it now. I 100% think that the theories about Mahmoud being Darius are right. And I think that
I think he's too old.
I think the kids are going to go back and eventually end up being involved in the DPG in some capacity.
Mm-hmm.
I can just see it connecting up.
I could
like
see it.
that.
Oh, I could definitely see that for sure. I mean, I feel like all of them would want to, maybe outside of Kenji, but most of them would be definitely into continuing to help out.
Kenji's just going to go to some penthouse, try and impress some people.
Yeah, but I like this, and then it ends basically with like you said, Dr. Wu leaves, the Merc almost tries to take them out, the laptop gets destroyed and all that, but they end up leaving the island, and Ben says goodbye to Bumpy, everybody's hugging it out, they leave the island, and Darius and Kenji are not getting along, but I love that ending, and it felt like a perfect ending. It really did. Darius goes to the back of the boat by himself, and he's like, "We made it," and he takes a mental picture, and then of course that door handle shakes. So there is more. There's got to be more. Season 4, where are you? Let's learn. When is it happening?
Yeah, I'm very interested to see how they do more, because I feel like you're right that it was a perfect ending, and I could quite happily end cap it there, and I'd be really happy with Camp Cretaceous as a whole. I think there's 3 key points that will factor into the future. The first is, like we say, Manticore being aware of the Scorpius, Manticore still having something to do with Nublar. Are they potentially going to intercept them as they're leaving the island? Is something else going to happen there? Is quite likely.
Well, I hope it's not an interception like they just did that same exact thing.
Like the helicopters come in with the spotlight.
It's got to be a little bit different, yeah.
Yeah. Well, okay, so there's 4 things, because I've just realized something. So the second thing that's now actually number 4 is the fact that they're sailing straight out into recently infested Mosasaurus waters. Because the Mosasaur has just been unleashed.
Yeah.
So maybe the escape isn't going to go as smoothly as they think.
No, that would be incredible to see. I mean, who knows how far it got, if it went anywhere, or if it'll attack them or not. That would be pretty brutal, and I don't know if they would make it out. But they made it out fine last time with the Mosasaurs.
Well,
so
they can wash up on sauna.
Yeah.
Then third is obviously, like we say, the boat. And I think we're both probably thinking that that's potentially a Scorpius Rex.
I did not think that.
Okay, well, we see 2, but we know that it can self-reproduce. So there's nothing saying that there were only 2 on the island.
No.
So I could easily see that being stored in there. And then if they make it to the mainland with a hybrid on board, that's a whole other load of issues. But also, if you think about it, if a Costa Rican incident got covered up, it would give a lot more ammunition for Wu losing all of his titles because they
Mhm.
can literally see the hybrid on the mainland. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
and fourth is the pilot. She wasn't
Mhm.
killed because it wasn't the front of the chopper wasn't mangled or anything as if something had come in and bitten her. So she
Mm.
escaped. And I don't know if this is just speculation or if it's been confirmed that this is um who this actress is playing, but there's meant to be a character in Dominion that is a pilot of some description who's also a female pilot. So I wonder if there's maybe some crossover there with this character having escaped. Maybe her background is she survived on Nublar, and that's now why she's equipped to deal with the situation that's
Hmm.
unfolding in Jurassic World Dominion.
Could be. I do like that idea. I mean, we have no idea if she got out or was flung from the chopper or what, but like it definitely could be any of the above. I think that's definite possibility. As far as what's on the boat, I wonder if it's kind of an allusion to the novel in a way where
Yeah,
half of the first novel, Grant and the kids are trying to get back to, civilization on that island to call to the boat that
yeah,
left the island because there's young or subadult or something like that velociraptors on the boat. And I wonder about Blue or
possible.
some of the other maybe aftermath
Yeah,
velociraptors that I guess are out there. Is it possible that there's a young velociraptor
I could
there?
see
I
it.
think
I
I
think
could.
Blue would be pushing it a bit because she's obviously back on the
No, no,
island
no,
during
not
Fallen
no, not
Kingdom.
not Blue. Blue's spawn.
Offspring.
A
Yeah,
offspring of Blue. How interesting would that be? I think that would be really cool to see. A young Blue here on this show.
yeah,
Could be really fun to see and to see like, you know, how that plays out. And I think there's so much great context for kids and velociraptor babies or young, velociraptors
yeah,
from the novel. There's so many instances in the novel where raptors are jumping on people's shoulders and petting them. They're fun to play with. They're essentially like a bumpy version of a velociraptor. So that is just like, oh my god, that would be so cool to see. And I was listening to because there is a roar in there. It's a very quiet, like
mm,
softer roar. It doesn't necessarily sound like it's something big. Plus, how did it get in that door? I feel like it maybe is something small. So that's why I'm kind of leaning towards a young velociraptor. I think that could be interesting, a nice, comparison to what the book did. And it could be fun. It could be really fun.
Well, on the subject of juveniles, my theory about E750 was a juvenile E750 that got
Hmm.
bred closer to the events of the third season. Because obviously we
Hmm.
know that it can self-reproduce, and maybe
Yeah,
at some point when it felt like it was under attack, it decided to self-reproduce. So there's a juvenile E750. It's on the island.
I like it.
Um,
Could be cool too.
the thing that I'm thinking now that we're talking about this more, is Manticore has to be the connective tissue. So I
Hmm.
wonder if maybe Manticore sweep into Isla Nublar in the aftermath of the InGen operation to get the Indominus sample because they want to find out what that operation was about. Maybe they get the carcass of the Scorpius, they recover the pilot as a stranded member of crew on the island who might have
Hmm.
valuable intel, and they also intercept the kids, get the kids, and also get a live specimen of whatever's in the hold. I
Yeah.
I could see that kind of connecting all of these different plot threads, and it would explain how characters like the pilot could come back in the fourth season, even though
Yeah.
we're off of Nublar now.
I'm down for whatever. I just I have no idea. I think yeah, there will definitely be more. That's no way that they're closing the door there. And I
Yeah,
wonder, where all these parts will connect and intersect, and will a dinosaur be brought to a mainland? Will it be brought to Sorno? Will Manticore be out there. And yeah, I do like that idea. Manticore intercepting all of these things and, trying to figure it all out and try to parse it out. And then Manticore maybe becoming Biosyn in some way or something like that and leading to a larger story. I think that could be a great way to tie in. But again, I don't know.
Can you picture that? Like, this is me setting unreasonable expectations, so sorry, guys. But imagine if, like, season 4 ends with Manticore learning that their operation's been bought out or something, and say they're on a boat, you just get a sequence with a helicopter arriving at the boat, and the final shot is the door opening and Lewis Dodgson walking out.
That would be amazing. That would be amazing. But I think we'll leave it there. We speculated a lot, and I think we talked about all those spoiler details. So thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in. It's been fun, and season 3 was wonderful. I had so much fun, and I can't wait for whatever comes next. It's going to be fun. So please let us know what you think, because I really want to hear them. We'll put together a full episode on your reactions. Email us, JurassicParkPod@gmail.com. You can also email over like audio messages from your phone. Just shoot those over as well. You can call us 732-825-7763. Leave us a voicemail and we'll play it on the show. And of course, you can just write in your thoughts as well. You can contact us on our contact form on our website. But we really want to hear all your thoughts because I think it's going to be really, really fun to discuss this throughout the next few months, years, however long. Until we get another season. I don't know. But yeah, thank you guys so much. Please follow us at JurassicParkPodcast.com. You can follow at Jurassic Park Pod on Twitter, at Jurassic Park Podcast on Instagram. That's about it. Subscribe, like us here, do all that fun stuff. I'm at Brad Jost on Twitter. Tom, why don't you let everybody know where you're at?
I'm at Tom_Jurassic. Come and let me know how whack my speculations around the next season are.
Thank you, dude. Thank you. It's been a lot of fun, and I'm glad we can finally produce some content this time around.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you to everyone for tuning in as well. It's been a blast.
Thanks, everybody. Take it easy.